today for the message, I wanted to talk about, how we can learn things better looking back. Sometimes when we're in the middle of something, we really don't understand what's happening. And so we panic, we're afraid. And sometimes it takes us a few years down the road where we can then look back and see something that was happening. And I know I get questions all the time about what's happening in our world right now. And what I wanted to say is that, maybe we don't understand it all. Maybe we have to go through it, and then someday we'll be able to look back and see, perhaps this is what God was doing. And so I came across this video. I think it'll help us put everything in perspective. It's called The Great Realization. Enjoy.
Tell me the one about the virus again, then I'll go to bed.
But my boy, you're growing weary, sleepy thoughts about your head.
Please, that one's my favourite. I promise, just once more.
Okay, snuggle down, my boy, though I know you know full well. The story starts before then, in a world I once would dwell. It was a world of waste and wonder, of poverty and plenty, back before we understood why hindsight's 2020. You see, the people came up with companies to trade across all lands, but they swelled and got much bigger than we ever could have planned. We'd always had our wants, but now it got so quick. You could have anything you dreamed of in a day, and with a click. We noticed families had stopped talking. That's not to say they never spoke, but the meaning must have melted, and the work-life balance broke. And the children's eyes grew squarer, and every toddler had a phone. They filtered out the imperfections, but amidst the noise, they felt alone. And every day the skies grew thicker, till you couldn't see the stars. So we flew in planes to find them, while down below, we filled our cars. We'd drive around all day in circles. We'd forgotten how to run. We swapped the grass for tarmac, shrunk the parks till there were none. We filled the sea with plastic, because our waste was never capped, until each day when you went fishing you'd pull them out, already wrapped. And while we drank and smoked and gambled, our leaders taught us why. It's best to not upset the lobbies, more convenient to die. But then in 2020, a new virus came our way. The governments reacted and told us all to hide away. While we all were hidden, amidst the fear, and all the while, the people dusted off their instincts. They remembered how to smile. They started clapping to say thank you, and calling up their mums. And while the car keys gathered dust, they would look forward to their runs. And with the skies less full of voyagers, the earth began to breathe, and the beaches bore new wildlife that scuttled off into the seas. Some people started dancing. Some were singing, some were baking. We'd grown so used to bad news, but some good news was in the making. And so when we found the cure, and were allowed to go outside, we all preferred the world we found to the one we'd left behind. Old habits became extinct, and they made way for the new, and every simple act of kindness was now given its due.
But why did it take a virus to bring the people back together?
Well, sometimes you've got to get sick, my boy, before you start feeling better. Now lie down and dream of tomorrow, and all the things that we can do. And who knows, if you dream hard enough, maybe some of them will come true. We now call it the Great Realization. And yes, since then there have been many. But that's the story of how it started, and why hindsight's 2020.
I mean, it certainly makes you think, right? I don't know what we're going to realize when this is all over. I know that when you look back, things look very different than when you're going through them. And we may realize a lot of things. We may realize that God was teaching us things, showing us things. We were finding out new things about ourselves. Maybe we're just finding out that there was a better way to do life. Maybe we always thought we had the good life, the best life, and maybe slowly that life was eroding from us. You probably know the story about the frog in the kettle, where you put the frog in the kettle and you heat up the water little by little, and when you heat up the water little by little, the frog never jumps out. If you throw a frog into boiling water, it hops out. But if you throw a frog in and heat it up little by little by little by little, they don't notice the incremental change until it's too late. I'm sure if you think about our society, I'm sure we might look back someday and say, man, maybe a few things were out of balance. Maybe we weren't doing things that were the healthiest for us. You hear people talking all the time about work-life balance, and all of a sudden the door got completely slammed shut on all of us, and we've been forced, maybe the pendulum swung completely the other way, but it makes us think, doesn't it? What is the balance of life? What is the real rhythm of life? And what will we look back and learn? Maybe our culture has been slowly cooking us and we didn't even know it. Now, I wanted to read to you something that probably, maybe two of the more famous verses. I call them refrigerator verses. These are the ones you stick on your refrigerator, and they're the ones that inspire hope and faith, and of course we need that right now. But one of them that you hear a lot is from Jeremiah 29:11, and the verse says this: I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to give you a hope and a future, plans to prosper you, not to harm you. And so what we know about that verse, besides that you've seen it on a calendar or someone's refrigerator, is there's some context to it. It was written, and it's in the book of Jeremiah, and it was a part of a letter. And if I could today give you some context besides the fact of whirlpool or Frigidaire, the real original context of that verse goes way back to the story of the children of Israel. The children of Israel finally arrived in their promised land, and they had sort of received all the things that God promised to them, but they were being disobedient, and they were marginalizing people, and they kind of became the oppressors when they used to be the oppressed. And so the prophets came along and warned them several times, and they sort of didn't get the hint, and eventually they lose their promised land. And I'm fast forwarding the story, but they lose their promised land. Someone comes in and takes them out of their promised land, carries them off into exile, into Babylon. And now they're in exile in Babylon. And now they are hearing from all of these prophets, people, religious people, telling them, don't worry, God's going to bring you right back. It's going to be fine. And along comes Jeremiah. Now, this is the context of Jeremiah 29:11. This is the context of that verse that you hear so often. Jeremiah says, and it's a letter in the 29th chapter, if you want to look it up. It's actually a letter. And in the first part of the letter, it says, listen, we've been taken into exile. We've been carried off into Babylon. But Jeremiah says, don't listen to all these false prophets. Don't listen to them with their hype and their dreams and, oh, we're going to be back there soon. Jeremiah says, we're going to be here for a minute. We're going to be here for a while. And he says to them, you need to settle down and build houses, and you need to get married and marry, and you need to plant vineyards. Now, you don't plant vineyards if you're about to leave. He's telling them to do all these activities that let them know this is going to be your normal for a while. Now, I'm no prophet. I'm not saying anything about America, but what I am saying is sometimes people just want to give you the quick and the easy answer. And Jeremiah, interestingly, this is the verse that we always use for hope, but Jeremiah was giving it in a time when everyone else was giving cheap hope, or what I call hype. They just kept throwing out things. And Jeremiah gives something that's deeper, that's richer. He says, settle down, build houses, get married, marry your children, plant your vineyards, get to know your neighbors, be good to the people around you. You're going to be here for a while. And then he says, but remember this, I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. Plans to give you a hope and a future. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. So there might be some short range time here. It might be a little bit of an extended time, but that doesn't negate the plan that I have for you. I think that's so important, because I think real hope is something that we hold on to that gets us through. And sometimes we have to realize, I actually like the verse that just says settle down, right? We use that word, but literally it meant settle in there. But I think sometimes we just have to settle. We have to settle down and realize, we may be in this for a while, whatever normal might look like for a while, life might be different for a while, but remember this, perhaps this is a transition to something better. I want you to think about that. Perhaps. I don't know. But one of the things that I think about when I talk to my grandma, I've been reading a lot of books about great transitions in history. And I've been talking to my grandma, or when I do, she always talks about how busy we are, us young kids, all you kids go all over the place. And she reminds us to call her, and, we do our best, or maybe we don't do our best, I probably should say. Hi, Grandma, if you're there, I love you. But she says some wise things. We didn't run around so much back then. And so I use this to help us understand. We got the automobile, and then we got the television, and then we got the internet, and we just kept getting things that were improving our life. And I'm not here to say I don't have a car or I don't have internet. And what I am here to say is, what? Sometimes we have to realize that these subtle improvements also have some subtle consequences, some unintended consequences. And we've been consuming life at this rapid pace. Now, I know, I want to get back to it, and so do I to some degree. But what I'm saying, and this is important, is maybe when we go back, maybe we don't want to go all the way back. Maybe it was too extreme that way, like it's too extreme this way, but maybe there is a better medium in the middle. Maybe we lost something from a generation or two. Maybe they have something to show us or to teach us. Perhaps that God, who has a plan for us, is using this little time out, if you will, to teach us something about ourselves, teach us something about how to really live life. Maybe we just really didn't know how to live it. We just sort of inherited it. I've talked to a lot of people, and when they're honest, they will tell you they were burning the candle too far. They were at too many games, their schedules were absolute chaos, and they were doing it and they were happy to do it because they didn't know otherwise, because they had to do it. And now all of a sudden, things are different. And they can think and they can reflect. All I'm saying is, maybe it is a great realization. Maybe we're realizing things about ourselves that we needed to realize. Maybe we can learn from our Jewish brothers and sisters, which is actually our heritage, our spiritual ancestors, Jesus, right? Many others who paved the way for us, about Sabbath, about rest, about rhythm in life. I know you can't be legalistic about these things, and that's certainly not what I'm going for. But maybe a notch below legalism is there's some healthy rhythms in there, some stuff that we could perhaps get back to. I was reading a book about what the automobile did, and they were talking about in the 50s, and I wasn't even born yet, so what do I know? But they were saying it was common. You would go to church, and then you'd go to grandma's house, and the family would spend all of Sunday together, and there'd be the cousins and the extended family. And with the automobile, people started to travel more. They started to move, and life became not centered around the family and the community. And yet that's the thing I think that people cry for the most. They said then as people got cars, they started to, instead of going to grandma's, we'll ride out in the country a little bit and take a picnic. Nothing wrong with that, of course. And again, it's this slow trickle away from community and family and the things I think that we're really craving the most. Now, Jeremiah had some really good advice, and it made me think, I wonder if our society, got just a little out of balance. And maybe, I don't know, but maybe there's something here for us. Maybe it will help us find our ballast, to right our ship a little bit and find a healthier rhythm for our life. The other verse that is almost on everyone's refrigerator or in their mirror or something is Romans 8, verse 28. And Romans 8:28 is a similar idea, but the idea is that all things work together for good. All things work together for good. So when you're in the middle of something, like we're in the middle of now, you don't understand it. But I like the saying that goes, embrace the place where you are. Embrace the place that you are. That is, here you are. And maybe it's deeper than, COVID-19 or pandemic. Maybe it's you're in a financial crisis. Maybe you're in a health crisis. Maybe you're in a marriage crisis. Maybe you're in a family crisis with your kids. But you're in a place. And sometimes it feels like a mountaintop, and sometimes it feels like a valley. But as we go through life, we can learn to embrace the place that we are. Instead of always looking for a new place, we say, you know what? I'm going to find some good in this particular place. And wherever that place is, I know that God's with you in that place. When something's new, it surprises us, it shocks us, and here's the thing, oftentimes it scares us. Think about it. Something new, it scares us. I was reading a book about a guy who was talking about back in the day when they had outhouses. You'd have a separate building where, you use the facilities, as they say. And then they designed indoor plumbing so you could bring that inside. Now, none of us like the idea of going to an outhouse today. But can you imagine this? They struggled to get people to bring the outhouse into the house. Why? Because it was so smelly and it was such a disgusting thing. And they think, why would I want to bring that into my house? Because it was new. It was shocking. Think about it. All the time we reject things because they're new. And think about it. We have the New Testament. Was it readily received? No, not at all. It was scary. Now it's precious. Now it's vital. Now it's sacred. But when it was new, it was scary. This is the thing that we have to remember. If we're going to keep learning and we're going to keep growing and going forward in life, is that new things can often be scary. I was hearing some folks from Stanford talk about the transition that they were having moving their classes online. It was very interesting because they were saying at Stanford they had to go to online classes, and they were getting some data as to how things were going. And they said one of the things that we learned is when we have a large classroom, very few students raise their hand and ask questions. In a large lecture hall, they just don't do it. And they know from data points that a lot fewer students raise their hand and ask questions than actually have questions. So a lot of people sit there with their questions and never raise their hand. And they were saying that now that it's online and people are anonymous, they're much happier to ask their questions from behind their computer screens. Interesting, isn't it? What is it that keeps us? We're afraid. I don't want someone to see me raise my hand because they might think I don't know everything. And the reality is what? None of us know. It's uncertain for all of us. But for some reason, we cling to certainty. We sort of want to cling to the idea that we know, or somebody knows, and they can give us the ironclad answer. So I have a few quick homework assignments I wanted to give you to help us during this transitionary time. And the first one is just kind of real simple. And I've talked about this for years, and it's a simple idea. You're not just a body, you're a soul. And this is clear in so many ways. I could use 100 examples. But just the fact that you care, that you cry, that you connect, 100 different reasons why you realize there's something more to you than just a body. Otherwise, if you were just a body, when your body died, we would just roll it off to the side of the road, or we just run over it because it's just meat anyway, and we wouldn't worry about it. But when someone dies, a whole series of things happen. All that just to say something very simple. You and I know this. We're soul beings. We have bodies and they're connected and they're somehow intertwined, but at the fundamental level, we're soul beings. And we have to feed our soul. We have to. You can't just feed your body. You have to feed your soul. And so hopefully maybe this message will feed your soul. But maybe you can find other things that will constantly feed you on the inside. You say, well, how do I know if I'm being fed on the inside? They're the kind of things that fill you up. You don't always have to think of them as religious. People, I think, sometimes make the mistake and think, if I go to church, I'm feeding my soul, and they come out, parched and dry. I can't tell you what feeds your soul. You can tell me. You can tell yourself what feeds your soul. It's when you feel that your cup is full, that you're learning, you're growing, you're becoming, your heart is enlarging, and this is the kind of stuff that you need to do. And so you'll find some things. They may be things that you listen to. It may be meditating, it may be taking a walk in the woods. It may be just sitting out in a beautiful meadow, experiencing God's presence. There's so many things that you can do that can feed your soul. But you need to, because you have to realize that you're not just a body. And if you cave into this idea and think, I just got to feed my body and then the rest will take care of itself, you'll realize at one point you're going to start to shrivel up. You need this. And the other thing is, during taxing times like this, you need it all the more. Isn't it true? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm less than you. Some of you seem to be doing so great, but I think I can get a little agitated easier. I feel like I can be edgier for some reason, just cooped up in the house all the time. And I think I need things that replenish me, and you need things that replenish you. So make sure you find those, and make sure that you're engaging your heart in those kinds of things, whatever they are, that will really help you. And I just wanted to share one more thought on this. During these transition times, during that quote exile, when you're building your houses and you're digging in your farms and you're waiting it out, maybe a thing that we need to make sure that we do is we need to try to give grace. Give grace. This is huge, right? Because we all need grace. And first of all, we need it for ourselves, because just like I said, I know for myself, man, I haven't always been at my best. And I look at myself and I want to kick myself, and maybe you do the same. I don't know. But maybe you're realizing you're not at your best. And for one thing you can just say is give grace. Give grace to yourself. And don't overdo it on yourself. Don't beat yourself up. It doesn't help. And give grace to others, Just give them a little grace as well. We all need it. And that's what's going to get us through. Make sure you just provide a little bit of room. James, I think, says, love teaches us to give grace to one another, right? When we love people, we just give them a little bit of grace. Second thing is, or the third thing I want to say is, remember that your feelings, right? What your feelings and your emotions, it's weird because you can shove them down, but it goes back to the idea of being a soul, right? You have them, they're real. And, I think some of us got the idea growing up that you weren't ever supposed to really have feelings or share them. You were just supposed to suppress them or rise above them. And I get that to a certain degree. There's a certain degree, where you have to play over it and that sort of thing. But listen, you can't go your whole life and shove and suppress your emotions. It's not good for you. It won't work well. It won't come out well. Because eventually, what's inside, listen carefully, it will come out. It just does. And that doesn't mean you're a bad person. Listen, it doesn't mean you're a bad person if you get angry. You're not a bad person. A lot of really good people get angry. It's not a bad person if you lose your temper. Now, I'm not saying to go around and just go ballistic on people. I'm just saying this is a part of being human. All of these fear, anxiety, they're all natural and normal emotions. And I think one of the things that helps us is we get to share those with people, whether you're, in a circle of girlfriends and you're just sharing, or maybe you're with a group of guys and you're ribbing on each other. I got to get out with some guys this week, and man, it felt so good. And, we were distant, but we were good. And man, you have this release that comes. You need that. So in whatever way you can, you need to find some ways to do that, because it's like venting, it's like breathing for your soul. It has to vent, right? In a good way. And your feelings, if you aren't careful and you shove them down, they'll damage you more. Find someone safe, find someone caring, right? And share them. Let them out. Let them go. You'll feel so much better. One of the big questions, of course, I get asked all the time is like, where is God in this, right? And why isn't God doing something? And I read a book. I was telling the Wednesday night, we do this Wednesday night thing, and I was telling some of the people there on Facebook about, I was reading a book, it was called The Disappearance of God. And in there, the author explained very, very skillfully that in the beginning of Genesis, God is everywhere. God is everywhere and doing everything. And as you watch and read the whole story, which again, you've heard me talk about this, most of us don't do, and I understand it's big and difficult, but you need to get the whole arc of the Bible, right? Where he goes all the way through the Old Testament. And he shows that what happens is over time, God is less and less and less and less involved. And he shows it in so many different ways. I was fascinated to read this. And I keep thinking I've read so much about the Bible. This just blew my mind. And he's like, it's like, and this would not his quote, but this would be mine. In the beginning, it was chaos and creation. And in the end, it was crickets. Nothing. Where's God? And you hear all the prophets saying, God, why do you hide yourself? Or the writers in Psalms saying, God, where are you? How long is this going to take? And you get the idea that God is like raising children. Think about this. He's like raising children. And in the beginning, you do everything, right? I mean, I wish you could see, but like right around behind me, Charlie was just pulled away in a wagon. I mean, she is high maintenance. Amazing, but high maintenance. Someone has to maintain her 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, except for the hour she takes a nap. Thank God for the nap, right? High maintenance. You have to be involved. And evidently that starts to go down at some point. I don't know. But no, over time, they can dress themselves. Over time, they can drive themselves. Over time, they can feed themselves. Theoretically, they can get a job and pay for their own. But you know what I'm saying? Over time. And this author paints a beautiful picture of how God is helping us grow up, helping us be responsible for ourselves, helping us, stand up and be the image bearers that he created us to be. So, during this time, I want you to think about this. It's not always what you're looking at. It's how you're looking at it. And you're looking at the situation that you're in. Again, whether it's the pandemic around us, or it's the lockdown, or it's the job and how that's working out, or the family, or your own personal stress and struggle, or something completely unrelated, but you're looking at it. And I was reading a book this week that was explaining how even Albert Einstein got shook by what's called the uncertainty principle, and he led right up to it. But it became so difficult when scientists went on to say, when you're looking at the speed of something, it's not certain. It's subjective, based on where you are. And think about this. Everything's subjective based on how you're looking at it. The same exact principle. Two people could be looking at the exact same circumstances and feel very different and see very different things. What's important is not what you see, but it's how you're seeing it. That is up to you. That's where faith comes in. If faith means anything, listen, if faith means anything, it must mean this, right? That you get to decide how you're going to look at something. You could be one against 10,000. Everybody's looking at it this way, but you see it and you see something different. I think that kind of faith will ignite you and it will change your life for good. Listen, transitions are tough. They are. And I don't know how big this one's going to be. You know, when the history books are written and we look back, I don't know. But if you think about it, they've been tough, but usually they bring about good. Think of the Great Reformation, right? When humanity was oppressed, the church was, instead of lifting people out of oppression, was partnering with the oppression. And it took a brave young man, Martin Luther, right, to help people transition out of it. And, you know, he didn't take us all the way, but he sure made a major step, you know. Another Martin Luther King Jr. helped us through turmoil to make another transition. My point is this: you could look at so many major transitions in history, and the thing that you have to realize is when you're in the middle of those, they're tough. They just are. And if you can hang in there and realize that someday you might just look back and say 2020 was the year of the great realization, that my vision became clearer, that I started to see life in a brand new way, maybe in a way that I never thought I would before. You know, these revolutions have thrown off, when America was born, we threw off imperialism of England, right? That was a tough transition. The Civil War, that was a tough transition. And there have been so many unbelievable things that have been unbelievably tough. So as you think about this, I want to read you one last thought. So here's the thought. What if you were born in or around the year 1900? Now, I'm pretty sure that would be the year my great-grandma Selders was born. Grandma will probably correct me, but it's right close to there. In or around the year 1900. For a small amount of perspective, imagine you were born in 1900. When you were 14 years old, World War I starts and ends on your 18th birthday. Feels so bad for the seniors. You know, they've missed their spring breaks and they've missed their proms and they missed their graduation ceremonies. And, you know, you do feel bad. You feel bad like they're missing so much. But just a little bit of perspective. From the time you were 14 to 18, World War I. 22 million people were killed. Later that same year, you didn't catch your breath. A Spanish flu epidemic hits the planet and runs until you're 20 years old. 50 million people die from it in those 2 years. Yes, 50 million. When you're 29, the Great Depression begins. Unemployment hits 25%. That runs until you're 33 years old. The country nearly collapses along with the world economy. When you're 39, World War II starts. You aren't even over the hill yet. And when you're 41, the United States is pulled into the war fully. Between your 39th and 45th birthday, 75 million people perish in the war. And the Holocaust kills 6 million. At 52, the Korean War starts and 5 million people perish. At 64, Vietnam War begins and doesn't end for many years. 4 million people die in that conflict. Approaching your 62nd birthday, you have the Cuban Missile Crisis, a tipping point of the Cold War. Life on our planet, as we know it, could well have ended. As you turn 75, the Vietnam War finally ends. Think of everyone on planet Earth born in 1900. How did you survive all of that? A kid in 1985 didn't think their 85-year-old grandparent understood how hard school was. Yet those grandparents, and now great-grandparents, survived through everything listed above. Perspective is an amazing art. Let's try and keep things into perspective. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you that when we don't know what to do, we put our eyes on you. We pray that you'll help us all to just settle down, as Jeremiah said. Settle down because you have good things. There's good things ahead. And we don't understand. We can't always know. We can't always predict. We can't always be certain, but we can trust in you. And God, I pray you grant us all perspective, that whatever happens as we look back, we will realize that you were teaching us and showing us and helping us become better people, the people you called us to be. Fill us with your grace, fill us with your love, with your strength. In Christ's name, amen. Amen. God bless Orchard Grove.